Have you ever held it together through the appointments, the admin, the family needs, and then you finally stop and your body just drops? Like you're tired but wired. You can't sleep properly, your mood feels thinner, you're foggy and puffy, your weight is shifting, and the smallest curveball makes you want to cry or snap. And everyone keeps saying it's just hormones. Today, I'm sitting down with Dori Martin, and we're talking about what's really going on underneath those midlife symptoms when you've also been carrying long-term caregiving stress. By the end of this conversation, you'll understand why more protocols can actually backfire when you're already depleted, what Dori means by burnout physiology and nervous system load, and you'll have one simple stabilizer you can start with without turning your healing into another full-time job. Just a gentle note before we begin. Today's conversation includes serious illness, end-of-life caregiving, and burnout. Please listen in a way that feels supportive for you. You're welcome to pause, skip ahead, or come back at any time. If you're tired of holding it together in hard rooms, appointments, hospital days, and service system, and then crashing afterwards, you're in the right place. Hi, lovely. Caregiver to caregiver, I'm really glad you're here. I'm Michelle. As a caregiver and advocate, I know firsthand what it's like to become the walking medical encyclopedia, to fight for continuity so you don't have to repeat your story, and to leave the room thinking, I should have said that differently. No pressure, no perfect routines, and no toxic positivity. Just one gentle reset and one practical next step so you can have calmer days, clearer words, and advocate without self-abandoning. Before we jump in, if you want a simple tool you can use in real time when your body is flooded after a hard day, you can check out my 90-second reset. It's a self-paced, trauma-aware toolkit to help you settle your body so your brain comes back online, especially in hard rooms and the crash afterwards. The link is in the show notes. No pressure, just support. Today's guest is Dori Martin. Dori is a functional diagnostic nutritional practitioner and HTMA practitioner who helps midlife women make sense of symptoms like fatigue, sleep disruption, anxiety, mood swings, inflammation, and weight changes, especially when they've been carrying a long season of stress and responsibility. What I appreciate about Dori's work is that she doesn't treat women like a problem to fix, and she doesn't hand you a plan that takes more energy than you actually have. She's lived the reality of caregiving while raising a child and supporting loved ones through serious illness and end-of-life care. And she knows what it's like to hit that point where your body basically says, I can't keep doing this. This is an educational conversation, not medical advice, and we're going to keep it practical and nervous system safe because caregivers don't need one more overwhelming list. Dori, welcome.
So happy to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Dori, before I start my episodes, I love for us to just take a moment to ground and take a breath because we miss this opportunity so often. So let's take a moment and take a breath together and then let's start our conversation.
Beautiful.
Dori, before we get into the why and the practical tools, I want to start with you because I think so many caregivers will hear themselves in your story. You were carrying so much at once, running your work, raising your child, and supporting a parent through end of life, and then facing a terminal diagnosis with your husband. In that season, what were the first signs your body started sending that you couldn't just push through anymore, that this wasn't ordinary tiredness?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for asking that. Well, at the time, as you said, I was going through so many different things at one time. I could tell that I was tired and my mind wasn't really as sharp. And I was having a hard time getting things done. Little things started becoming a big deal. I would just kind of feel like I wanted to snap over things that really usually didn't really bother me at all. And I kept saying, but I'm going to deal with this when whatever it is what I was dealing with was over. I kept saying that. I can take the hit. I'm going to keep going. And at some point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I just shut down. I couldn't function. And that was when finally my stepdad passed away. And I would say that I showed up to a marathon in flip-flops thinking it would be just, not that it would go away. I didn't really have an idea of how it would unfold. And then things just started to snowball. I remember that when my stepdad died, I just collapsed. So I was ignoring things for so long, saying that I could take the hit. And when finally there was a moment to take a breath, it was like my body knew that this cannot go on. I am done, and I'm going to make sure that you're going to stop. And so that's when I realized that I couldn't take the hit, and really I shouldn't. And that caregiving still continued, and I didn't feel like I had the capacity to do it anymore, and it really scared me.
And I'm hearing that when you showed up in flip-flops, that was because you didn't realize that you're actually running a marathon instead of like a short sprint that just from the car to the house or wherever it might be.
Right. I mean, I'd seen that my dad was declining. I noticed that my mom, I lived 2 hours away. I was a single mom at the time. My kids were really small. And I noticed my mom would rush home every time she had an errand. And I noticed like my dad's falling randomly. And I realized this is going to progress. This isn't going to resolve itself. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get in-home care, and that would be fine. And then it'll give me a reprieve. But one thing has led to another. And all of a sudden, the list of things to do kept growing. They had a very traditional marriage. And so my dad took care of a lot of the logistics and house stuff and the taxes, and he was an accountant. And then he couldn't do it anymore. English is my mom's second language. So I became his interpreter, his advocate, and I had to do all the things he wasn't able to do as I was running my practice and helping raise my kids. And so it was not something I planned as one of the things I was going to be going through in life, and it just sort of took over everything. And I'm sure a lot of people would be able to relate, because it's not something that's planned, that we're prepared for, or at the time really talked about. So I really appreciate that you are sharing all the different aspects of caregiving, because I don't think a lot of it is something that we anticipate, but something that we're called into. And that just happens, and then you realize you're in it and it's going to progress. And it's something that I think too late for me, I realize self-care is a huge part of it. It's not okay to say I'm going to take a hit or I'm going to handle this, and when everything quiets down, then I'll go to the doctor. Then I'll make my appointments and take care of myself. Maybe then I'll reconnect with my friends, because I got sick of being the person to be talking about the difficult things and this is happening in this medical appointment or whatever. And so I kind of isolated. And so when I really fell apart, I didn't feel like I could call anybody. And it's all things that, had I known better, I would have done differently. So now that people like you are sharing resources and explaining and giving people a heads up and understanding that self-care is so important, and what that even means, right? It's not like getting away for a weekend. I mean, it could be that, but then it's more practical things that don't add additional stress, money or time or energy that we already don't have.
And I think the piece of information that was really clear was that you didn't realize you were taking on another full-time job. You didn't realize the layers that would be required when stepping into the role. And we talk about the hundreds of jobs in our brain, the thousands of filing cabinets that we have out for each area of our lives that we take, because if we don't have them, they start to intermingle and we get a little bit more overwhelmed, because we're like, oh no, wait, that's for dad, that's not for my daughter. And then we start noticing, okay, my brain's not having the same capacity because I'm pushing and pushing, and not recognizing that maybe I'm pushing too hard. I'm not giving myself the breath that I need. And you're right, because self-care in those moments isn't about big grand gestures. When we're talking about these exact patterns of fatigue, sleep, or fatigue and sleep issues, anxiety, our mood swings, weight gain or weight loss, depending on what's going on in our lives, and the brain fog that comes. And it feels like the usual advice doesn't touch on any of that. It really doesn't help us to work through it. And we talked a little bit about those different layers, and the fact that when we're approaching care, we're not looking for something to overhaul us in moments. We're wanting habits that we can stack to our existing roles that have compounding support for us over the long term. With your work, what are some of the most common misconceptions or misinterpretations of these symptoms as a caregiver?
Primarily, my work is with burnt out midlife women. And I think that because a lot of us are in this age of being in the sandwich generation and our hormones, so many things are happening at one time. Perhaps we're going through empty nesting, or we're still taking care of kids that have unique needs, or a combination of that. And then we're taking care of our parents. Maybe our partner has something. Like, so many of us are being diagnosed in this generation and earlier. And so the people that I work with are definitely dealing with so much transition already. And what I found is it's not something that just happened even with just the caregiver role, but it's been leading up to a point where we've been doing it all, trying to have it all. It's like a Gen X thing, but we end up exhausted anyways, right? Just because we've been around doing all the things. And this has been, I think, wonderful technology, but it's go all the time. And we have the ability to go all the time. We have people who have access to us all the time and access to other people. And then we have the ability to be on 24/7 because there's always emails, there's always social media, there's always like deadlines, and we always have technology to be able to work with that. And so a few things have happened. We've moved away from what kind of like we have outgrown the ability to be in the current environment, or probably it's the other way around. And so this current environment and lifestyle doesn't fit with our primal needs. And so what I find is that in addition to having to care for other people and having it unravel, you don't realize that this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue and a part of your life and taking over, like you said. But also, a lot of us in midlife have already shown up exhausted. And then we think this is hormones because it's the obvious thing that's left us, not realizing that, okay, that's a big part of it. But hormones typically protect us from burnout. And so we get more energy and we're able to sleep. We're able to actually burn fat more easily. Our cortisol levels and everything are enhanced with estrogen. And so we're able to do more things. But then when the hormones leave, it's actually exposing what was already happening underneath physiologically. And so the misunderstanding is that it's menopause when really it's burnout and pushing beyond capacity. And at the core of it, not feeling safe and that you're supported for a very long period of time. And what I mean, as I know your listeners understand, it's about feeling like it's not available to us to just be and to relax and to receive. There's so much going on right now with jobs, career, and then caregiving and parenting and all the things that we're constantly doing. So we're human doers and not human beings. There's a great book called Rushing Woman Syndrome where she talks about it. But this cascades into our nervous system. We're simplifying, of course, but you're either in a state of fight, freeze, or fawn, or in rest and digest. And I would say that most of the time we're on that spectrum where we can't access that recovery state. And so when our hormones start going wonky and leaving, what's happening is we're seeing exactly what's been going on underneath it all. And we feel it all at once while we're dealing with additional responsibilities of caregiving a lot of times. And we think it's either hormones or that something in us broke. And really it's a need for self-care. So of course you can see it's flawed to think, no blame or judgment, to think that we can just push through, or I'll take care of myself when all this is over, or it's my responsibility to hold everything together for everybody. And also I think that we isolate ourselves because I don't think a lot of us were conditioned. I know that I was a latchkey kid, so we had to figure things out on our own because our parents were working and we had to take care of things in the house. And so you had to figure it out. And so a lot of us were conditioned to kind of be independent and sort things out on our own, which has served a lot of us really well. And that's why we're so resilient and we're able to do things for so long. But the backlash of that is that we shouldn't have to. And so I think a key thing is to be able to ask for help and have community and stay connected, because when we can help each other, then a rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody can benefit from that.
And I really like how we're able to name it. If you're listening and feeling seen, this isn't because you're weak or not doing it wrong, or that you're doing it wrong. This is what long-term load can look like in the human body. Plus, when you add societal expectations, then having to hold it together to a level that's acceptable within society when you're talking about caring and advocating for someone, having to make sure that you're not too happy, not too sad, not too angry, assertive enough, but not too assertive to be overbearing. Nobody develops those skills because we don't know we need them when we're at school. When we're going through school and we're being educated and we're not prepared for this side of a role. We've not been built or designed to ask for support in these moments. It's not communicated that it is supported and acceptable and it's something that is needed. History and the line that we follow shows us that asking for help gets us a question mark over whether or not we have capacity, rather than it being that in order to maintain capacity over the long term, that help is vitally important to ensure that the person who is in that role is able to sustain it. Because I think part of our journey that is missed as we're talking about all of these different layers is that in the medical field, as a caregiver, nobody talks about what happens if the primary caregiver falls down, hits burnout, their body gives out, because in my experience, no one person can step into the role that I have been sustaining and maintaining for years, and it takes maybe 4 or 5 people because they get so tired so quickly, whereas we have been conditioned to just keep going. It's like that brick wall that you just keep pushing and pushing because you've become this hulk of a human being in these moments. And we're talking about hormones, or it's just hormones. It's just anxiety. When someone says that, what do you wish midlife women and caregivers understood about what's happening underneath? Because when we do go to the doctors, I have personally been told that's just anxiety when it's not. And I think from what I understand about functional medicine, functional diagnostics, is that you're not looking at, like when we get our blood tests, and they go, everything's fine. It's normal.
And it's so infuriating, right? Because something's wrong. And you'd rather know what it is, because as caregivers, we're problem solvers. If we know what the problem is, I don't care if I do care if it's bad news, but give that to me straight. And I can do something about it. If you give me a nothing, then I'm kind of at a loss, right? And so it is frustrating. And you clearly know there's something wrong. You clearly know you're not functioning the way we were before. You know that your metabolism is going wonky. You know that your mood is off, your sleep is off, your gut issues are happening. I mean, so basically underneath it all, what's happening is when you're in a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, your nervous system is in that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, not in that rest and digest state. So what does that look like? Your body is going to prioritize safety every single time. So there goes procreating, right? So your hormones are going to go wonky, even if you're not in that perimenopause or menopause state. It goes wonky. And then your digestion goes offline, because if you're in a state of danger, the last thing your body's going to think about is digesting and absorbing nutrients, which, by the way, is your source of energy and the spark plugs to your body that gives you the ability to respond to life. And so that starts getting offline. And so you start getting tired and having brain fog and all these things that are because you're not being supported physiologically. And then, of course, your sleep is disrupted, and then you end up with brain fog, and you end up not being able to function the same way you could before, and you're reaching for words, and you're feeling like your little capacity to generate energy starts getting depleted because we need food, vitamins, minerals. And that's one of the things that a functional practitioner does, and what you were talking about. We're looking at optimization in functional medicine. But in the medical model, what we're looking for is basically they take a sample of a sick population, essentially, and they keep shifting the benchmark lower and lower for a sicker population. And so what you're seeing is, and this is the way that they're running their model. This is not in like judgment. I mean, I do think we can do better. But what's happening is they're looking at a pool of sick people. And so that's what they're going for. Like you're being compared not to optimize, but to actually, when are we going to get you a number so sick that you need to be medicated? And that's what the goal is. Like, when is your marker going to get to the point where we need to medicate? But until then, you're okay. And so that's what's happening. It's not things are all working fantastically. It's because of the way that the model is created, because the medical models goal is to see when you get to the point when you need to be medicated. Otherwise, they don't have anything to offer, because I think things are shifting, thankfully, but it wasn't, I mean, we call it kind of sick care, not healthcare, whereas functional medicine started forming because we were thinking about optimization, and also with the belief that the body and its innate intelligence knows how to heal itself, but things are getting in the way. And what we want to see are, what are the blocking factors? And when we remove those, then a lot of great things can happen in your state of health. And so that's the kind of medicine that I practice. And we used to run, 5 different labs so we could see what's going on with your gut. Do you have any pathogens? How's your digestion working? Do you have inflammation? Do you have any food sensitivities? And then there's a hormone test. And now I start with one, because you have to do something with all of those labs. And those labs are very expensive. Just one gut lab is like $482 American dollars. And then you've got like 5 of them, right? And then for each one, then you have a protocol, and then you have a handful of supplements that you use to be able to address that. And for an overly taxed system, that is going to cause more harm, essentially. So I start with one, and basically it's whether or not your body has any adaptive reserve, what's been going on with your nervous system, because we can see mineral balances. They're very emotional as well. Have you been depleted over a long period of time? And do you have the ability to even generate energy or respond to the inputs of medication or even hormones or even healthy food? Are you able to break down and absorb and digest it? And with this lab, you can see whether or not that's possible. So what we do is we focus on minerals, which are the spark plugs to your body. We also look at toxic elements, which deplete you further, and your emotions. And so you're able to see all these things, but at the crux of it, we want to make sure that you have the energy so that you can do the things that your body wants to be able to do to help you recover. Beyond even that, the biggest thing that burns through your minerals are nervous system dysregulation. So that's why I really appreciate what you talk about, because if you don't regulate your nervous system, you can do all the other things. You might just be standing in place or not making any progress because your body is still not focusing on healing. And that's really the goal. I mean, that's the baseline. And so it's all the things that you talk about that are accessible. They don't have to be super expensive. You can get the technology or whatever it is if it's something that you love to do. But a lot of us just want the things that you can do in progress during the course of your day at any moment to be able to be in a.
I really like how you've just named what happens when we go to our general practitioner. We have blood tests run. We're telling them that something is off, and to understand that what they're looking for is getting to that worst case scenario before intervention. I always found it really challenging as a caregiver to go, we can see that they're struggling. Why are we waiting until we have to do massive intervention? Why are we not doing proactive intervention to support them to be better before we get to this depletion level? And their explanation is because there is no other option. We cannot provide the support, even though they're begging for the support, because they haven't hit that number yet. And until they hit that number, I can't intervene. And there's nothing that you can do until they hit that number. And so the difficulty with that is that you're watching your loved one or yourself get to a point where then recovery is so much harder than it should be. And I really like this idea of proactive investigation, proactive care. And we were talking about burnout and about the curve that we experience when we have been sitting with such high levels of cortisol, adrenaline in our system, where we are spending more time with less bandwidth. So when we start, our nervous system has lots of bandwidth. We're able to ebb and flow between the states. Whereas as more time goes by and the more instances of trauma, the more instances of being required to hold it together, to advocate with sustained vigor, because so often you're dealing with different levels of medical understanding. The first person you might see is a junior registrar, or even a doctor who's just learning. And then you see the junior registrar, then you see the senior registrar, and then you get to see the consultant. But then their learning curve is that, unfortunately, these guys don't 100% know and get it right all the time, and mistakes are made. And so it's our responsibility as medical advocates for our loved ones to be able to say, I need to speak to the higher up person. I need to have my questions answered, but that is exhausting. The level of energy and being switched on, the waiting, and then being able to regulate after that when you're trying to care for your loved one, the space is not there. And I really like how you're naming each of these chronic caregiver stress moments where we have to understand that our nervous system is our first point of giving back to ourselves, for understanding how our nervous system works. And it's not that we're asking for this magic cure-all that takes us back to having the biggest bandwidth that we possibly can and because of one breath. What we're saying is that we're building this deeper understanding of our individual nervous systems by providing small bite-sized moments that are not overwhelming, that don't require us to have special equipment or machinery, that is powered by our own capacity. It's giving back to ourselves in these micro moments. And when you look at it in a solitary moment of 90 seconds, that doesn't seem like a lot. But when we're talking about 30 years of investment of time, if you're a long haul caregiver, you're caring for your child or your partner who is unwell, when you actually look at, okay, if I do 3 lots of 90 seconds a day and then I build that to 5 lots of 90 seconds, it compounds over time. And you've got a really clear message. A lot of what looks like hormone problems is often deeper psychological stress that's kind of developed over this longer period of time. And the nervous system dysregulation plus mineral depletion in our bodies. It's not looking at it as a standalone one item. We're looking holistically at the person, and we're not just going, okay, no, your bloods are fine. No, you're just anxious or you haven't had enough sleep. We're not looking at them as isolated moments in our timeline, which I think is really important because most of the time as a caregiver, we are constantly fighting for holistic recognition for our loved ones. But then we don't stop and say, maybe I need holistic recognition for my body and for how things.
So trained on who you're caring for. And definitely we all know that statistic that the person who's a carer often gets sick and sometimes ends up worse. I mean, when I was doing all the labs, my fiance, now husband at the time, was diagnosed with a terminal condition. And by the time he's got stabilized, I looked at my labs and they were worse than his. And a lot of it was because I had forgotten myself in that circle of care. And again, I mean, this is on the tail of my dad. He transitioned out. I fell into this horrible state of I couldn't really get out of bed. And then my fiance came on to my life and literally saved me, right? And then when he was fine, I realized I'd done the same thing again. Like, I can do this. I'm going to figure this out. And yes, we used labs and we did functional medicine and things stopped progressing, even though the medical model said get your affairs in order. But at the same time, from a caregiver standpoint, it's such a drive or it feels so natural to just, I can do this and I can help this person. This is like important. And I'll deal with my own stuff. Oh yeah, I'm really tired. I'm not sleeping and my appetite's weird and my gut's not working really well. And I feel kind of like this emotional roller coaster, but I'm going to get through it and then I'll deal with it, right? So I did it a couple of times. And as you said, very important to note that we are the advocates and we forget that things are happening to us too. That diagnosis or whatever it is that's happening, we are actually experiencing it from this other perspective. Michelle, I've been recently really fascinated with this idea about moral injury, where you see all these horrible things happening to another person. They used to attribute it a lot to combat veterans because they see so much horror and they can't do anything about it and they're probably contributing to it. And in the case of a caregiver, I just feel like we see so much unfair suffering and we don't really talk about it a lot. I know we had a previous conversation. I really appreciate you bringing that to light, but that we have seen, not only is it just advocating for another person and doing all these things and being on alert and making sure that they're cared for, but we see the suffering that they go through. And it's so heartbreaking beyond words to see that and not have a place to put that. So it's like somewhere, talk about fight, flight, or holding stress in your body, because we see what we think is so unfair or so horrible for another person. And at some point, people even, I know this term, it's the compassion fatigue, where you just flatline emotionally. And it's just things that phase other people don't phase you because you've lost that that capacity in protecting yourself. And again, getting back to minerals, we see something, the minerals flatline. Literally, they create neurotransmitters and emotions. And we see this thing called calcium shell. Calcium is not very smart mineral, and it needs to be escorted and told what to do. But then when it goes up, it's like calcification in your sink or in your water. You see that it kind of builds up in your cells to protect you. A defining trait of a calcium shell is somebody who's been pushing on beyond capacity for too long, too much, and done a lot and overfunctioned really, but are out of energy. And so the calcium shell goes up, and it's literally your body and its innate intelligence trying to put the brakes on everything and also buffering the emotions. And so you get that sense of that bad thing happened and you feel kind of numb, or you feel your body is responding to it, but the emotions aren't quite there because your body is trying to help you cope. And so, yeah, that's another piece that I feel like isn't really talked about very much, but that is your body. When you're feeling all the things, it's not that your body's broken. I think that's another thing that a lot of us talk about. Like, we feel broken because we are not able to respond the way we used to, but your body is actually trying to slow things. That's why your metabolism is slowing down. The mitochondria, the energy that, remember in biology class, it's the little energy generators in your cells. And that not only is involved in creating energy, but also just detect danger and safety. And when it's detecting danger for too long, it literally slows everything down and begins to shut down. And that's why we can't access the energy we used to have. And that's why it's important to look at that. Because along with nervous system regulation, having no energy is not going to give you what you need to be able to recover. So all of this is interconnected. And what burns your energy fastest is this ongoing, like you said, the chronic stress, always on your mind that my loved ones, the person I'm caring for, is not safe. So that puts you in a chronic state of fight, flight. And that's where all of these things start shifting into burnout. And to your point about the medical model, so we are looking at blood work. Blood work is homeostatic. So what it's trying to do is keep balance. So a huge percentage of the minerals, which actually are the things that generate your energy, among other things, is that it's very homeostatic, and most of it is not in your blood. It's mostly, for example, magnesium, maybe 1% is in your blood, but most of it is in your cells. And same thing with potassium. So when you're looking at blood work, it's not really looking at it in quite that way. And with toxic metals, when your body is not feeling safe, it's also not going to detox. So you're going to see that accumulate as well. And that's going to cause additional stress and a lot of fatigue, and it's going to snowball. And that's also going to disrupt hormones and receptors of hormones and all these other things. And it's going to disrupt digestion. So all of it has a domino effect that isn't being watched, and you're getting the best that they have with the medical model, but they're not seeing what's happening on a cellular level, which is what the hair sample, the tissue sample. Sure, I mean, maybe you have thyroid hormone, maybe you have enough estrogen and those kinds of things, but is it getting into the cell? And that's what we're able to see when we look a little bit deeper. But we actually know, because based on how we're feeling. You feeling like that brain fog? Do you feel kind of like everything is slowing down? You can't access things the way you used to. You can't recover as quickly as you used to. And you do feel that sense of your emotions are beginning to flatline.
And I really think what we're seeing is that caregivers have not become a part of the care plan to date. And I think that's part of the process that is missing at the moment, that I'm working really hard to advocate for on our platform to create and provide safety and support for caregivers, is that when we are discussing the care plan for our loved one, we have to be a part of that care plan and that care team. We should have the same level of voice and be heard, because we live the 24-hour knowledge and we've lived every experience across the period of time that we've been caregiving for. And that could be their entire lives, because unfortunately doctors come and go. So they don't see from start to finish. They don't see what's going on underneath. And the same with nurses. We go through so many different medical professionals in the period of time that they're not seeing that. And so I really feel that when we're talking about compassion fatigue, when we're talking about looking at the impact of trauma, the impact of watching your loved one suffer through something and not having that addressed or not having it discussed, just like with people who are in the medical field as doctors and first responders, when they see a trauma, it is just as devastating as if we were at war. for our bodies, because again, we're not taught how to support ourselves through something like that. Most of the time, nobody discusses with a parent or a caregiver how they felt, what they saw, how that impacted on them. And we carry that in our body, our brain. We replay it at times because it can be scary. It can be overwhelming. And I think when we are talking about all of these complex ideas that form caregiving, we're not asking a caregiver who's listening to deep dive into a rabbit hole. We're just giving you guys context and understanding as to why your bodies are responding the way that they are, and giving you moments of pause to consider something that may provide you with more answers than what you've got to date, of a way of starting to come back to yourself and rediscovering the joy and the moments that fulfill your soul, so that we can then help you to explain to your health experts what is going on and why it's not okay for you to remain feeling these levels in your body, where you have days where you might be suffering from a headache and you're drinking the water and you're eating the food and you're moving your body and you're doing everything that you think you should be doing right, but you still have that thumping headache because there's something that is underlying. And I know when we stop and we think about giving ourselves time, we're like, when, where, how? And so these signs that stress is driving the symptoms, it's more of giving yourself a moment to then reflect on why my stress is driving my symptoms, rather than not seeking support because you just get told it's just anxiety. You're getting old. It's what happens. Your bones are uncomfortable. When that's not the underlying issue, just because your bloods don't reflect that something is catastrophically wrong doesn't mean that there isn't actions and steps that we can take to support us to not feel overwhelmed, to not have brain fog, to not feel like we can't sleep and we can't switch off. And I love what you said about complexity becoming its own sense or stressor in itself. And I'd love to ask, how do you help women find a path that is sustainable for a caregiving life that doesn't add more load or complexity, but gives them a space to nourish themselves?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it is I do look at where they are in terms of their stress response, and I like to help without adding on all the labs and all the other things. And so a lot of it is basic lifestyle needs. And so, as I mentioned, we kind of grew away from what the physical body needs, and we live in kind of a constructed technological world. And so a lot of it is primal inputs, I guess is what I call them. And they're simple things like sunshine and resetting your circadian rhythm. We have a clock in our body system. And when you're exposed to the morning sunshine, especially, it tells your body what time it is during the day, and it starts resetting things like how much energy do I need? When do I digest food? When do the hormones need to come back online, and detoxification, everything. And so you actually are resetting, and it takes a little bit of time to rebalance that. And so even sitting next to an open window or something so that you're getting exposed to sunshine, even 5 minutes in the morning can really make a huge difference. That was actually something that really helped me. And as you said, breathing. I mean, a lot of us, when we're stressed out, we're actually hunched over and we're breathing in the upper part of our bodies. And so I like to ask people to put their hands on their chest and one on their belly and breathe in and out and notice what's moving. And usually it's just the chest, not the belly. And your body, when it's in a state of stress, it's only going to breathe in a very shallow way. And so it's kind of a feedback loop. And so just breathing full belly breath can make a huge difference. And that actually turns off or gets your body into that state of rest and digest versus fight, flight, or freeze and fawn. And then hydration, just 1% of dehydration signals danger to your body. So you can see I'm talking a lot about safety and like your body's signals, like natural signals to show that you're going to be okay. And so water, maybe a pinch of sea salt, which helps with mineral balancing. And it can give you also your energy and help with digestion and all kinds of things. So sipping that throughout the day, and then connecting somehow with friends if you can, even if it's just a quick conversation or something just to check in. But the thing that I think is most valuable is, like you said, things that calm down your nervous system. For me, I like breath work. I like listening to binaural beats, music that goes right, left, right, left. There's this idea that what they discovered is when you're really stressed out, it starts focusing in one area of your brain. So when you listen to certain music or you're stimulated on a right, left, basis, then it kind of dissipates that because it can't focus on one area and it lightens that stress response. I used to follow this woman, Melissa Tears, and she's a hypnotherapist. But she said, even just when you take any object, I have a glass in my hand, and you cross the midline, pass it back and forth, a ball, a pair of glasses, or whatever, and that is bilateral stimulation that can calm down your nervous system. Doing these things and just like dosing it throughout your day. My favorite is breath work because it's always available and people aren't always, you don't have to look for an item or anything. But I remember I was studying for a certification for a Heart Math Institute, and they have this thing called coherence breathing. And I did have a gadget attached to my ear. It's an M wave. And I thought, I'm in the zone. I feel zen. And it will tell you where you are. It kept red. And I thought, I'm what? And then I realized my brain, or I don't know what it feels like to be calm. Because I think I'm calm, but it's saying, no, I'm actually still activated. And so what I think is the huge value of doing it repetitively is it's reminding your body what it feels like to be calm, because we've forgotten. I literally believe that a lot of us have been in a state of fight, flight, and feeling that by necessity for so long without awareness and without information that you're sharing to help us calm down, learning about their nervous system and how to regulate it in a way that doesn't take a lot of time. Dosing these things, there's so many things you do. Hum, you can move your body and dance, you can walk in place, you can listen to binaural beats, as you said, or as we had talked about once, even just looking up and scanning your environment, because physiologically, primally, we don't do that if we're the victim, right? We're the person in charge if we're doing the scanning and looking around. Again, that right, left eye movement, taking a break and just looking into the distance and taking a few deep breaths. Dosing all this throughout the day in the in-between moments, or even when you're with your loved one, can really make a huge difference. This is the things that people roll their eyes at and don't do because it's so simple, but it's been the most transformative thing that I've done to help myself. And as I'm talking to other people, it's been making a huge difference. And something that I really love to share all the time is that the other thing that we understand about heart math is that people can sense how you're feeling. I think it's a 6-foot radius. I'm not sure. And so if you're with a carer and you're stressed out and feeling dysregulated and I'm not safe, I've got to do all these things, I've got my to-do list, and they can feel it. Even animals actually can really feel that because they go by intuition. But when you're the one who's most regulated, you regulate others. And so that was my biggest motivation to include myself in that circle of care, because truthfully, we are the foundations of where the care begins. And as you said, it's so eloquently that we're not being considered not only by ourselves, but by society and by the doctors or the carers that are trying to take care of that person that we are supporting. And if we're not supported, then they can give us the best advice. But if we can't go home and actually follow through with it because we're not supported, then nobody's getting any kind of benefit from that. So anyway, I hope that helps.
I really like how not only are you giving information for our listeners who want to advocate for the one who's tired of the supplements, the diets, the many hormone therapies, maybe the intermittent fasting, maybe cutting everything out, and they feel worse and stuck in the situation. When a caregiver says, I'm doing everything and I'm still puffy, I'm still wide, I'm still exhausted, I'm still gaining weight, these are the areas that we're talking about. They're micro moments that stack over time, that compound. So an example would be if you did one squat every time you made a cup of coffee, and say you only made it once a day. That would be 365 squats across a 12-month period. When you look at the benefits to your body of doing that motion, it's the same when you look at the areas that we've just been discussing, which is breath work, which is looking at providing yourself with your base needs, like you would for a car or any other type of device that you need to keep healthy: sunlight, food, hydration, rest. And I really think that when we look at someone who is living on hospital snacks, on missed meals, on adrenaline because they don't have a choice but to keep going, on eating really late at night time because it's the only moment they get to breathe, it's the first time that they stop really in the day. But when we pause for a moment and we look at the information of what does that do to our blood sugar, how in the instability that then provides in real life when we take a moment to reflect on on how skipping meals during emergencies, how not prioritizing our own needs in those moments have long-term impacts on our sleep because we're starving or we've eaten too much.
Like you said, all these things are actually depleting us of energy. So a lot of what we're talking about is building energy. And I just say that our bodies are sort of like very complicated plants. And so, like you said, sunshine and water and the right soil and everything. But when you're fasting or depriving yourself of food because you're trying to diet and get yourself to a certain size, so you're doing really high intensity work, if you don't have the energy, you're actually depleting yourself even more. And that's exactly why all the things that kind of used to work when we were younger and had the ability to adapt, we're not able to anymore. And so it's pushing us even further and further into a state of burnout. And that's the thing that really gets me, Michelle, because we're doing our best and we're trying, but the information that's out there and what we believe is helping is actually making things worse. Then we go to the doctor and then it's like, there's nothing wrong, or you're just aging, or you've got your blood sugar out of balance, so take this medication. But then behind the scenes, there's so many other things that kind of led up to this. And what we're doing is actually taking us backwards because we have old information and myths that just have not. I know people are out there trying to debunk them, but they're just still persisting for some reason.
And I think that's really important to understand that sometimes when medication is thrown at the chronic, we've hit that number that now we need to step in because we haven't actually addressed the underlying situation. Sometimes medicine can make the situation worse, or it makes it better for a short time, but then it doesn't continue to build. And then we're scrambling for what else can we do in these moments? And unfortunately, modern medicine doesn't have the answers for why a medication that should be working to resolve the issue is not, and we're not looking at the holistic approach. And you mentioned something earlier, and we've talked about this, about emotional stress and moral injury actually accelerating burnout in women and men who are caregivers. And that moral injury can look like being forced to fight systems, not being believed, being in impossible decisions that have to be made in split seconds, feeling like you just can't win this battle. And if the term moral injury, like we were talking, is new for anyone listening, I'm talking about that deep internal, this isn't right feeling when you're trying to protect someone you love inside a system that doesn't feel safe. And in your view, how does that moral injury and that stress, how does that kind of emotional load show up in our body?
Yes, that's such a big topic in and of itself, isn't it? It's a lot of these things. I think that at the very cruxes of it is not safe. My loved one is not safe. And again, that whole cascade of nervous system and feeling helpless and feeling like you have to fight because this is not okay with people that are actually supposed to be the experts at trying to help you. And so it does put you in that situation of you've got to fight. You've got to keep going. You've got to advocate. You have to be the one researching. You have to have the right information in order to be able to advocate. You have to know what to even ask or what to do. So you have to become the expert. So all of these things, the shifting roles into like more and more escalation of having to do things to protect the one that you've loved. And also as you're being kind of gaslit and told everything's okay, or this is the thing, or this will solve everything. By the way, there's very rarely just a magic bullet. All of that puts you in a space where you have to be somewhat on the defensive all the time while you're experiencing that emotional exhaustion of carrying that. This isn't right. This isn't fair in your existence, right? Way of being. And so it shows up in burnout. It shows up in hypervigilance, and it shows up in constantly thinking and trying to be ahead. And it feels unsafe to be still, and it feels entitled to rest and practice self-care because all of this horrible stuff that's not fair, not right, not safe is happening. And that carrying that for so long is why we're burnt out, why there's premature aging, and why all of these disruptions in our health and wellness. So it's not about the diet. I mean, of course, like eating clean and nutrient-dense foods, there's the aspect. I think that when you want to recover or even keep pace, let's be honest, right? Sometimes the cascade is so high. Your best thing is keep baseline or keep pace, but it's biological and it's also psychological. It's both because your psychology impacts your physiology impacts your psychology. So the beautiful thing is things like breath work and doing things that are more body-based, they address both because When your body feels safe, then your brain calms down and then your systems come back online and you're able to function better and you're able to start to heal. But a lot of us really have a hard time getting there for all the reasons that you explained about the caregiver experience.
And I really like how you named hypervigilance, and then there's hypovigilance, and the fact that we were talking before about not responding the same way that another person who has never experienced would respond, because we kind of are so used to that baseline for the person that we're caring for that people look at you like, how are you not falling apart right now? It's like, I will later, just not right now, because there's no space for that. And you just don't realize it. And sometimes what should be an emergency, you no longer have as an emergency. And sometimes we need to have that reset as well. So before we move on to talking to our listeners about the resets, I'd love us to do a tiny reset just now. If you could leave caregivers with one message about their body, one sentence that helps them to stop fighting themselves, I'd like us to have a think about that whilst we take a deep breath in. And then what would that be? So for a second, put your hand on your chest and on your stomach. Take a deep breath in, and we're going to do a longer exhale. So deep breath in, keep going. And just now you've done a tiny reset to help your nervous system have more bandwidth. So Dori, what would it be that would be one message for their body to stop fighting themselves?
So I think that it's kind of what you just did, to teach your body what it feels like to be safe in your mind. And I really believe that it's about repetition and gently easing your body back into a state of rest and digest. It's only just reminding your body. Sometimes it's not available to us. I think it's also understanding that this is a continuum and that it's difficult and sometimes we can't get there. But just as we're constantly reminding our body, right now I'm safe and taking a moment for myself, the more you do it, the more you build trust for yourself too, that I've got my own back, I'm here. It reminds you that you're important, that you're part of the equation of care. And so it's just these small doses of resets, as you said, I think is so valuable. I want to say your body isn't broken. When you're experiencing symptoms, it's telling you, hey, I need a little bit of support here. And so it's up to us to take notice and learn what it needs and give that to your body and your mind and your soul.
And I really like where we set up a small reset for our listeners so that they can try it for the week ahead. What could we offer them today as a tiny reset that someone can do in under a minute? Something for the tired but wide moment or the post-appointment crash that follows as caregivers.
Oh, so many things come to mind, and maybe repetition is a good thing. But like you said, I think the most powerful thing is to straighten up your posture, because that's kind of signaling that you're okay and you're in control, you're safe. And then take that slow inhale and then double the exhale, because that exhale is what is signaling to your body that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that tells your body it's okay to get into that rest and digest mode. Something else I like to do is just take a moment to look around and see what's around you and identify in detail, like maybe as if you're seeing it for the first time, because we're so in our heads and we're so often ticking off what needs to happen that we're not in the present moment. We're missing life, right? We're in the projecting in the future, or thinking about the past and responding and reacting to all of it. And so when you're actually in the present moment, you can come back online in your body and sense a feeling of calm. And when that happens, your body is actually getting into that state where I can come back online and begin to generate more energy, presence, and calm. I'm feeling safe right now, so it's okay to do these things that'll help me feel better. Understanding that in 5 minutes, something else can happen again, and you again find that moment. It's like that ebb and flow. It's like surfing a wave. It's not that it's not going to happen, that you're going to be knocked off your feet. This is part of the caregiver journey. Also, just having somebody that has earned your trust and has got you, a community, people listening to your podcast, to know that you're not alone. Because I feel like feeling like you're alone in it without any kind of support is very painful and difficult. We've been through this, and this is probably a big reason why you're sharing with people. You're not alone, and there are answers out there, and you matter. You have the power to do this for yourself.
Because what you don't know, you don't know. And until someone shares it with you, you kind of feel isolated in it because nobody is sharing. So that is so important for us to be able to have that moment of community and connection. And I really loved how you talked about like focusing on something, like giving it your whole attention to it. And it made me think about like when you have a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water and you're holding on to it. And if we take a second to really focus on it and think of nothing else, okay, is it cold? Is it hot? Like the cup that I have is ribbed. So like running your fingers backwards and forwards over the bumps, I can only fit 2 fingers in it. It's smooth here. It's rough here. It's got like an abrasive bottom to sit on things, like really giving it your whole attention so that nothing else is in your brain except for the color of the cup, what it's feeling, its sense, all of your senses. Try and bring every sense that you possibly can. Does it have a smell? Does it have a taste? What does the liquid taste like? And just giving yourself, and that can all happen in 90 seconds. In 90 seconds, we can go through and have this intense moment of focus that just gives our brain a pause. And I want to thank you for that, for bringing that attention to those 3 things: having a breath, grounding yourself by focusing on a soul item. And it doesn't have to be anything massive. A simple cup of tea that you're holding on to or a glass of water is perfectly fine. And I really think that there provides us with grace. It provides us with compassion, and it gives ourselves boundaries that can ebb and flow, because caregiving is chaos at times and we never know what each day is going to bring. As much as we like to plan our little hearts out to make sure that we can have some structure, sometimes that doesn't go to plan. And so thank you. And for anyone listening who felt nothing or felt super teary or overwhelmed, you're not doing anything wrong. Your nervous system is responding to your life. So I want you to keep it really gentle because you deserve it. I want to touch base on where our listeners can actually find more information about functional medicine, how it works, and what you do for a living, because I think it just gives us another aspect to consider when we're being told that everything is fine, we're all normal, when we really don't feel that way. So Dori, where can listeners find you and your work?
Thank you so much. And I just want to say it was so elegant and beautiful how you had articulated all of the things about grounding yourself. For me, so as we had mentioned, I like to use functional medicine because we're looking at optimization. And honestly, I've seen a lot of great things happen even with like getting off the medication. Medications all have some kind of side effect. It's trying to do something that opposes what your body's trying to do. And as I said, tenet of functional medicine is that your body has an innate intelligence. And if we understand where the missing link is, we're able to do something to enhance things. It may not 100% bring everything back online, but especially balancing out your minerals and your nervous system, everything works better because you have the energy and you're also in that rest and recovery mode. And so for people who want to find out more about how I work and the lab I love to use, you can find me at dorimartin.com. It's DORIMARTIN. Also, if you want to email me at Dori@DoriMartin, I would love to answer any questions.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that I'll put all of those links into the show notes. You can also find her on social media, so I'll add those in as well to make it really simple for you guys. When you finish listening to the episode, you'll just have to click on her hyperlink and it'll take you straight there. Dori, I want to thank you because this conversation is going to land for so many caregivers, especially for the ones in midlife where they've been thinking, why is my body not responding the way that it was before? How do I not have the reserves? How do I not have the capacity to do what I was doing at the level I was doing it? And today we've talked about a few really important things. First, that a lot of what gets labeled as just hormones can actually be your body responding to long-term caregiver load. Not because you're failing, but because your nervous system and your foundations have been carrying too much for far too long. Second, we've named the burnout physiology piece, that tired but wired feeling, the sleep disruption, the anxiety, the brain fog, the puffiness that we can experience, plus the shift in weight depending on where we are in our caregiving journey. The way small curveballs And the way small curveballs can feel like emergencies, that not you being dramatic, that's a body that's been living on adrenaline and trying to protect you. and your loved ones. Third, we talked about why the answer isn't always more information or more protocols. Sometimes the most healing thing is the simple, more sustainable path, especially when you're a caregiver and your capacity is already really stretched. We also spoke about how minerals and depletion can be part of the picture without turning it into another rabbit hole or full-time job for a caregiver. And we touched on something so real for caregivers, the emotional load and the moral injury, that this isn't right feeling when you're trying to protect someone you love inside a system that doesn't feel safe, and how that doesn't just live in your mind, it can show up in your body too. So your next small step this week is this: choose one stabilizer, just one that your body can rely on. A simple place to start is one steadier first meal each day, or one steady snack if mornings are chaos. Not perfect, not a new diet, just something consistent that tells your body we're not in emergency mode right now. And if you're listening and you can feel your body humming after a hard day, remember you don't have to wait until you crash. You can use a tiny reset in real time. Hey lovely, caregiver to caregiver, if today's episode supported you even in a small way, would you share it with another caregiver who's holding it together in hard rooms too? And if you have a quick moment, leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify really helps us reach more caregivers who need calmer days, clearer words, and practical support. I'll see you right back here next time for another episode. I'm Michelle, and this is Nervous System Reset for Caregivers. No pressure, no perfect routines, and no toxic positivity. Just one gentle reset and one practical next step. Until next time, take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself. Thank you, Dori, for today.